The crack came first, a sharp, violent snap that split the air, followed by the metallic clang of the hammer hitting the hardwood. Then came the pain. White, hot agony shot through my left hand as my fingers folded in ways they were never meant to. I gasped, but the sound was swallowed by the pounding in my ears. Blood dripped from my palm, warm and slick, and I could already see the swelling bloom beneath the skin. My father stood over me, chest rising, slow eyes flat and cold, like he had just tightened a bolt, not shattered bone. Behind him in the doorway, my sister Jessica leaned against the frame. Her smile was small, cruel. She let out a short laugh, the kind you hear when someone gets exactly what they wanted. Then she stepped forward and said clear enough for every word to cut, "Now let's see you play with a broken hand." The words hit harder than the hammer. My stomach twisted, my mouth filled with the taste of copper where I had bitten my tongue. I forced my eyes to the clock on the wall. 4 hours. That was all I had before I was supposed to walk onto the stage at the County Arts Center, sit under the lights, and play for the scholarship panel that could change everything. 4 hours ago, my fear was missing a note in Chopin. Now I wondered if I would ever play again. My father turned his back, muttering about teaching me a lesson. Jessica's perfume drifted toward me as she crouched close enough for me to see the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. She thought this was the end of my dream. He thought pain would make me obey. They were wrong. Beneath the throb in my hand, something hotter was building. Anger that burned steady, not wild. The kind that waits. The kind that plans. I met her gaze and held it, refusing to look away, even as my vision blurred. I wanted her to see it in my eyes, the promise that this was the last time they would ever decide the ending of my story. My name is Emily Harper, and I am 19 years old, living in a small Ohio town where people wave from their porches and gossip travels faster than the mail. Our house sits at the edge of a narrow street lined with maples and cracked sidewalks. From the outside, it looks like any other home in the neighborhood, with peeling white paint and a sagging porch swing, but inside the walls have absorbed years of shouting slammed doors and the heavy silence that follows. I have been playing the piano since I was 6, when my mom saved for months to buy me a used upright from a church sale. She was the one who pushed me toward music, filling our evenings with the sound of Bach and Debussy until her sudden illness took her when I was 10. After she died, my father Richard became the only authority in the house and any warmth left with her. He runs a local auto repair shop and sees the world in terms of parts and results. If something is broken, you fix it with force, and if someone disobeys you, break them so they learn not to again. My older sister Jessica is 22 and has always been his favorite. She has his sharp jawline, his short fuse, and his knack for using people to get what she wants. Where I inherited my mother's patience and love for music, Jessica took my father's approval as both her shield and her weapon. She never misses a chance to remind me that in his eyes she can do no wrong. Since I was 12, I have known that in this family, love is conditional, and mine seems to come with a list of terms I never agreed to. Despite that, or maybe because of it, I poured myself into piano. The recital coming up tonight is more than a performance. It is the final stage of auditions for a full scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. The panel is made up of visiting professors and philanthropists. Winning means escape. Losing means staying here under his roof and his rules. Richard has never supported my music. He says there is no money in it, no future, no point. He wanted me to join his friend's construction firm part-time and enroll in community college to study something practical. When I refused, he called me ungrateful and selfish. Jessica followed his lead, making comments about how I should be more realistic. My closest ally is Maya, a childhood friend who has seen more of our family's darkness than anyone outside these walls. She is the only person I have ever told the whole truth to about what goes on here. I keep my head down most days, focusing on practice schoolwork and counting down to this night. Until this afternoon, I believed I could survive a few more hours under this roof before everything changed. I believed I could walk out of this house with my music and my future intact. That was before the hammer came down on my hand, before Jessica's laugh cut through the room, before 4 hours turned into an impossible climb I am now determined to make. Looking back now, it is almost impossible to count how many times my father and Jessica have found ways to clip my wings before I could take flight. The hammer was not the first weapon, and the recital was not the first stage they tried to take from me. When I was 14, I had been invited to perform at a regional youth music festival. It was the first time anyone outside our small town had noticed my playing. The day before the trip, my father told me the car needed repairs and he could not drive me. When I suggested a bus, he shook his head and said he would not waste money on something that would never go anywhere. I stayed home that weekend listening to the radio broadcast of the event, knowing I should have been there. A year later, I earned a spot in a summer program for gifted musicians. It was tuition-free, but required a month away from home. He told me flat out no. He said he needed me at the shop during the busy season. I remember the heat of that July in the grease-scented garage, tightening bolts and wiping oil while the program students played in air-conditioned rehearsal halls hours away. At 16, I had saved for months to buy a second-hand keyboard so I could practice privately in my room. One evening, after an argument about my grades, he came in, lifted it by one corner, and let it crash to the floor. Plastic cracked keys popped off and the sound still echoes in my head. He walked out without looking back, leaving me kneeling on the carpet with pieces of my music scattered around me. Jessica was never just a bystander. If my father was the storm, she was the sharp edge of the wind that followed. When I was working on my senior recital piece last year, she accidentally spilled a glass of water over my sheet music, erasing weeks of annotations. Another time she borrowed my metronome and returned it smashed, saying she had dropped it. I saw the dent that looked exactly like the heel of her boot. She liked to twist small knives into my plans, telling my father about times I came home late from practice, or implying I was skipping chores to play piano. She knew exactly how to light the fuse and then step back to watch him explode. They fed off each other in a way that left no room for me to breathe. If I succeeded, it meant I was defying his authority and stealing her spotlight. If I failed, it proved them right about me. Over time, I learned to hide things. I kept duplicate copies of my music in a locker at school. I recorded practice sessions on my phone and uploaded them to cloud storage in case something happened to my scores. I began to suspect that one day they might try something big right before an important event. Still, nothing prepared me for the sight of my own hand swelling and darkening under the skin, or the sick certainty in Jessica's voice when she told me to see how I would play now. The pattern was always the same. Build me up just enough to believe I could reach something, then yank it away. It was control masked as concerned sabotage, disguised as family banter. I knew this recital was my one real chance to leave, and they knew it too. That is why the hammer fell, not because of some sudden argument, but because the idea of me walking away free was more than they could stand. In their eyes, my future belonged to them to decide and to destroy if they wished. What they never understood was that every cut, every broken key, every lost opportunity had done more than hurt me. It had taught me to be ready to move when the moment came, and to never again trust them to hold my dreams without breaking them. The morning of the recital began with an uneasy quiet that felt heavier than any shouting match. Sunlight came through the blinds in narrow stripes across my bedsheet, and for a brief second I allowed myself to think it might be a good day. My dress hung pressed and ready in the closet, my music bag packed the night before. I had planned to walk to school early to warm up on the concert grand in the auditorium, but as I came down the stairs, my father's voice called from the living room. "Emily, sit down, we need to talk." He was sitting in his armchair, the morning paper folded neatly beside him. Jessica perched on the armrest like she owned the place, her phone in hand, eyes flicking to me with a smile that did not reach them. He started with what sounded like a business proposition. His friend from the construction company was in town and wanted to meet me over lunch to discuss a job offer. It was full-time, good-pay benefits. He spoke like it was already decided. I told him I could not. I had the recital tonight and I needed to be at the school. His eyes narrowed and the friendly tone vanished. "You still think this piano nonsense is going to take you somewhere? It is a waste, Emily. You need to get your head on straight." I shook my head, said I was not giving up this chance. That is when he stood, his frame filling the space between me and the door. "You will not walk out of here to that recital," he said, his voice low and hard. Jessica shifted slightly, almost like she knew what was about to happen and wanted the best seat for it. I tried to move past him, but he grabbed my arm, spun me toward the coffee table where his toolbox sat open from a project earlier in the week. In one motion that still feels too fast to have been real, he picked up the hammer. For a fraction of a second, I thought he might just slam it on the table to scare me, but then it came down on my left hand with a force that made the room go white. Pain tore through me, and I screamed, clutching my hand to my chest. Jessica laughed, not a nervous giggle, but a full sound of triumph. "Now, let us see you play with that," she said, her words sharp as glass. My knees buckled, and I fell against the couch, the edges of my vision dark. The clock on the wall said 10:20. In less than 8 hours, I was supposed to perform for the scholarship panel. I forced myself to breathe through the pain, tasting blood from biting my tongue. He dropped the hammer back into the toolbox as if he had just finished a repair job and muttered about teaching me a lesson. Jessica's eyes never left my face as she stood, her phone angled slightly, and I realized with a twist in my gut she might have been recording. Whether it was to brag or to use against me, I did not know, but the satisfaction on her face told me she believed the recital was over for me. In that moment, through the pounding in my head and the searing throb in my hand, I made a silent vow that this would not be the end. They had crossed a line there was no coming back from, and I was not going to let them decide my future for me ever again. I wanted to grab my phone and dial 911, but the thought hit me like another blow that in this town the police chief had been my father's fishing buddy for decades. Calling them would likely end with a report filed as a misunderstanding, or worse, with me being sent back into the same living room where the hammer had fallen. I thought about running to Mrs. Carter next door, but she owed my father a favor after he fixed her car for free last winter, and I had seen how quickly loyalty shifted here when people feared losing his help. My hand pulsed with each heartbeat, and every small movement sent waves of pain up my arm. I flexed my fingers slightly and almost blacked out from the intensity. Tears blurred my vision, but I bit them back, knowing Jessica would savor them like another trophy. She was still leaning against the doorway, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. Time was sliding away from me, and the more I thought about the recital, the heavier the dread became. This performance was not just another show. It was the final chance to prove to the scholarship panel that I was worth investing in. Missing it meant more than just losing money for school. It meant staying here under his roof, working in his shop until I was molded into something I would not recognize in the mirror. My mind replayed the moment the hammer came down over and over like some twisted loop. Each time I saw his face blank and unshaken, I felt the same mixture of rage and fear. I knew if I stayed frozen in that living room, they would win without lifting another finger. But moving felt impossible. My body was shaking from adrenaline and pain. I could hear my father moving around in the kitchen, humming under his breath as if the morning had been nothing unusual. The normalcy of it was almost more disorienting than the violence. I thought about the scholarship letter tucked inside my music bag upstairs, the hours of practice, the pieces memorized down to the last note. My chest tightened at the idea that all of it could be erased in one morning because I had been foolish enough to think I could outlast them quietly. A part of me wanted to scream at both of them, to tell them they could not break me. But another part knew that defiance in this moment might only provoke something worse. I was trapped in a house where the walls themselves seemed to side with them. The weight of years of small sabotages pressed down, reminding me that they had always found a way to keep me in place. The fear was real, but beneath it, something else was starting to push through. It was faint, almost hidden under the panic, but it was there. The thought that if I could get out of this house today with any shred of evidence, with any chance to stand before that panel, I might turn this moment into the thing that freed me for good. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing myself to breathe past the pain until the haze in my head thinned enough to think clearly. That was when I remembered the email I had sent 2 weeks ago to the head of the Conservatory Scholarship Committee. They had requested a preliminary recording from each finalist, and I had chosen my strongest piece, Chopin's Ballade in G minor. I had stayed late at school to record it on the concert grand with the help of my music teacher, Mr. Lawson. The file was perfect, every note captured, and I had saved a copy on my cloud account as well as in a private folder on my phone. If I could get to that recital, even if I could not play, I could still face the panel and show them the recording, explain what had happened, and maybe, just maybe, turn their attention toward the truth of this house. That truth needed proof. My gaze slid to Jessica, still by the doorway. She was too busy on her phone to notice me pulling mine from my pocket. I opened a chat with Maya, typing quickly with my right hand. "Need you to pick me up now." Dad smashed my hand. "Bring camera." She replied in seconds, 3 dots flashing, then her answer. "On my way. Stay safe." She had always been quick to act. I trusted her more than anyone. I knew she had a DSLR camera and a small microphone kit from her work at the local paper. If we could get video of my injury and a statement before too much time passed, it would be harder for them to spin it as an accident. I tucked the phone away just as Jessica glanced up. She smirked like she could read my mind, but said nothing. My father came back into the room holding a mug of coffee and told me I should go lie down because the pain would remind me why I should listen next time. His calm voice made my skin crawl. I nodded and started toward the stairs, cradling my hand, pretending to obey. Upstairs, I moved fast, grabbing my music bag and sliding my scholarship letter into the outer pocket along with the USB drive that held another copy of my recording. I checked the window in my room. The driveway was visible from here. 10 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up and I recognized Maya's car. I slipped my phone into my pocket and headed quietly down the back stairs into the laundry room where the door led outside. Jessica's laughter drifted from the kitchen, but my father was not in sight. I stepped out into the crisp air, biting back a gasp as the cold stung my swollen hand. Maya jumped out of the car, eyes wide, when she saw me. She had already set up her camera and began filming as she asked me to describe exactly what happened. The words came out shaky but clear. She got close-ups of my hand, the deep bruising and swelling visible even through the bandage I had wrapped around it. She also recorded a short video of me holding the hammer from the toolbox to show its weight. Then she clipped a small mic to my shirt and told me to keep talking in the car while we drove. I explained about the years of sabotage the way Jessica had laughed the moment it happened. Maya's jaw tightened, but she stayed focused on driving toward the arts center. In my lap, my music bag felt heavier than usual. Not with weight, but with the knowledge that inside it was everything I needed to turn this from another silent defeat into the first public crack in their control. This was no longer just about playing the recital. It was about making sure the people who held my future in their hands saw exactly what I had been fighting against and why I would not stop until I was free. The County Arts Center was already buzzing when we pulled into the lot, the late morning sun bouncing off car roofs and the faint sound of instruments being tuned drifting through the open doors. My stomach twisted with a mixture of nausea and adrenaline as I stepped out, cradling my injured hand against my chest. Parents and students in formal clothes moved in clusters across the sidewalk. Some glanced at me, their eyes flicking from my face to the obvious bandage, and then quickly away as if unsure whether to ask. Maya kept the camera rolling from the moment my feet hit the pavement. She whispered, "Just keep walking like you belong here." Inside the lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. Posters for the event lined the walls, each with the same bold headline, "County Arts Youth Recital Finalists Tonight Only." My name was there printed in neat black letters beneath the program list. Seeing it gave me a sudden jolt of strength. I spotted Mr. Lawson near the side entrance speaking with another teacher. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Emily, what happened to your hand?" he asked, stepping forward. I told him quickly in low tones, his expression darkening with each word. "Stay right here," he said. "I am going to make sure the panel hears this." The auditorium was already half full. Soft murmurs filled the space, along with the rustle of programs being opened. On stage, the grand piano gleamed under the spotlights. I was scheduled as the third performer, but I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on me long before my name would be called. When the announcer stepped to the microphone and began the welcome speech, I felt Maya shift beside me, positioning the camera so it could capture both the stage and the audience. The first performer finished to polite applause. The second, a violinist, played beautifully, but my focus was locked on the clock at the back of the hall. Every second felt like it was dragging and rushing at the same time. Then my name rang out clear from the microphone. Please welcome Emily Harper. I stood, heart hammering, and walked to the stage. Every step felt like crossing a threshold I could never come back from. Instead of sitting at the bench, I stepped to the microphone. My left hand throbbed inside its bandage, and I took a slow breath. Thank you for being here. I know you expected music from me tonight, but something happened this morning that makes that impossible. I held up my bandaged hand. A murmur rippled through the audience. 4 hours ago in my own home, my father took a hammer to this hand. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. My sister watched and laughed. More murmurs, now louder, a few gasps. I continued. He told me this would teach me a lesson that music is a waste of time. But I think the real lesson is that silence protects the wrong people. Maya stepped forward slightly, angling the camera so the panel could see me on their monitor. I have proof of what happened. I want you to see it. I gestured toward the side aisle where Maya had cued the footage on her laptop connected to the projector. The screen above the stage flickered to life, showing my swollen hand. Minutes after it happened, my voice describing the attack, the background unmistakably my living room. Gasps and sharp intakes of breath echoed around the hall. The video cut to Jessica's voice saying, "Now let's see you play with a broken hand," followed by her laugh. The sound sent a visible shiver through some in the crowd. I ended with, "I cannot play for you tonight, but you can see who I am in this recording I made for the audition weeks ago." The lights dimmed slightly as the panel nodded, and Mr. Lawson gave a discreet signal. My pre-recorded performance filled the hall, the notes rich and precise, every dynamic clear. I stood to the side, watching the audience watch me. Some leaned forward completely still. Others glanced toward each other with expressions that said they understood exactly what they were hearing and why it mattered. When the last note faded, there was a beat of silence, then applause louder and more sustained than I had dared to imagine. I bowed slightly, my heart pounding not from stage fright, but from the knowledge that the truth was now out in the open and could not be taken back. As the applause faded, I could feel the tension in the air shift. The panel of judges whispered among themselves, their eyes flicking between me, the projected image frozen on the last frame of my swollen hand, and Maya standing with the camera still rolling. One of them, a silver-haired woman in a deep blue blazer, leaned toward the microphone at the panel table and asked me calmly, "Emily, is this recording time stamped and verified as your own property?" I nodded yes, explaining that the original file had been recorded in the school auditorium under the supervision of Mr. Lawson, and that the injury footage had been filmed by Maya less than an hour after the incident. Before anyone could respond, a voice from the back of the auditorium rang out, and I felt my stomach knot. It was my father. He was standing near the door, his arms crossed Jessica at his side. Phone in hand, her eyes darting around the room. "That is not how it happened," he called, his voice trying to carry authority. She slammed her own hand in the door to get attention. A few people near him turned in their seats looking skeptical. My father took a step forward, but before he could continue, a tall man in the second row stood up. I recognized him as Mr. Kennedy, the father of one of the violinists and a lawyer. "Sir," he said evenly, "I have been listening closely, and based on the visible injury, the audio recording, and the fact that there are multiple witnesses in this room, including a school faculty member, I strongly suggest you stop talking unless you want to incriminate yourself further." A murmur of agreement swept through the hall. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, whispering to my father, but he shook his head, glaring at me. I could feel the familiar chill of intimidation he always carried, but it was muted now, replaced by the presence of so many people watching and recording. Mr. Lawson came to the microphone and confirmed my account, stating that he had seen me healthy and uninjured just the day before during rehearsal and that my playing was at its peak. He vouched for the authenticity of the pre-recorded audition piece and vouched for Maya's integrity as a witness. Then Maya spoke briefly, explaining that she had been contacted immediately after the assault and had filmed the injury and my statement without edits. She held up her camera to show the ongoing recording and the timestamp. The panel members conferred again, then the woman in the blue blazer turned back to the microphone and said, "Emily, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Your courage in speaking up is noted and will be taken into account in our deliberations." As she spoke, 2 uniformed officers entered from the side aisle. They were not local police, but state troopers, and I felt a rush of relief when I realized someone must have contacted them directly, bypassing my father's local connections. One officer approached my father and asked him to step outside for questioning. He protested loudly, pointing toward me, accusing me of lying, but the officer cut him off and repeated the request with a tone that brooked no argument. Jessica looked pale now, her bravado from the kitchen gone. She followed him out, still clutching her phone, but glanced back once with an expression that was no longer mocking but wary. The audience stayed quiet, watching them leave. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of silence lifting just enough for me to stand straighter. The panel moved on to the next performance, but I could feel eyes on me the whole time, not out of pity, but in acknowledgement that something important had just been dragged into the light. Maya squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "You did it." I knew then that whatever came next, they would never again be able to pretend this didn't happen. By the time the recital ended and the audience began filing out into the lobby, word of what had happened had already spread beyond the walls of the Arts Center. A local news crew tipped off by someone in the audience was waiting outside with cameras set up. They were not the small-town paper reporters who tended to soften stories to protect community members. These were from the regional affiliate that broadcast into multiple counties. As soon as I stepped out with Maya, they approached politely, asking if I would be willing to make a statement. I kept it brief, explaining that I had been assaulted that morning by my father and that I had chosen to come forward publicly to protect my future and to ensure it would not be hidden. Maya handed them a copy of the video she had shot, which they accepted with careful words about verifying the evidence. Off to the side, I saw Jessica standing alone. Her face was pale and tight, her phone in her hand, but no one to text. My father was not there. I would later learn that the state troopers had taken him to the county seat for booking on charges of felony assault and domestic violence. Because the attack had caused significant injury to my hand and could be tied to a clear motive preventing me from performing, it was treated with the severity it deserved. That night, footage from the recital ran on the evening news. Viewers saw my speech, the images of my injury, and heard Jessica's own voice saying the words that condemned her as much as they did my father. The public reaction was swift. My father's shop, once a staple in town, was flooded with negative reviews and calls for a boycott. Longtime customers began taking their business elsewhere. Jessica's reputation took an equally hard hit. She was enrolled at the state university, but the dean's office, upon seeing the video and learning she was under investigation as an accessory, suspended her pending a conduct review. Friends she had always boasted about stopped answering her messages. In the weeks that followed, legal proceedings moved quickly. My father was denied bail due to prior incidents of violence, documented by old police logs from neighboring towns, things I had not even known about. Jessica was charged with aiding and abetting, though her case would take longer to resolve. The conservatory's scholarship panel contacted me within days, informing me that not only had I been awarded the full scholarship, but they were also offering to cover my medical expenses for the hand injury through a special emergency fund. The town itself began to shift in subtle ways. People who had kept their distance before now approached me in the grocery store or after church to quietly say they had suspected something but did not know how to help. Some looked ashamed. Others simply said they were proud I had spoken out. My father's hold over them had never been just about favors and repairs. It was about fear, and now that fear had been punctured. I knew the damage he and Jessica had done to me over the years would not disappear overnight, but seeing them stripped of the power they had used so freely was the first real step toward freedom. For once, they were the ones answering to someone else, and I was the one walking away. In the weeks after the recital, I found myself waking up to a kind of quiet I had not known before. The absence of my father's voice barking orders from the kitchen or Jessica's footsteps outside my bedroom door was strange at first, almost unnerving, but slowly it began to feel like relief. I stayed with Maya and her parents while I figured out my next steps. They gave me the guest room at the back of the house where sunlight poured in each morning, and I could keep my music bag by the bed without fear it would be rifled through or destroyed. My hand was in a rigid splint, and the first few days were painful, every movement reminding me of what had been taken from me. But the orthopedic specialist assured me that with therapy and patience, I could regain most, if not all, of my strength. Twice a week, I attended physical therapy sessions at the clinic in the next town, working with a therapist who understood how much the piano meant to me and tailored my exercises accordingly. Each time, I could bend my fingers a little farther or press a key without sharp pain felt like a victory. Maya drove me to appointments and sometimes stayed to watch cheering softly when I made progress. The scholarship committee kept in touch, and a formal acceptance package arrived in the mail along with a letter from the head of the conservatory expressing admiration for my resilience. Knowing that the path forward was secure even as I healed gave me a sense of stability I had never had. I also reconnected with Mr. Lawson, who offered to help me adapt my playing in the interim and encouraged me to start composing simple pieces to keep my connection to music alive while my technique returned. There were hard moments, of course. Nights when I would wake from dreams where the hammer came down again or where Jessica's laugh echoed in an empty room. But those nights were fewer as the days passed, replaced by evenings when I would sit at Maya's old upright piano and tap out melodies with my right hand, imagining the day I could bring both hands to the keys again. Slowly, the space between what had happened and who I was becoming widened. I started to believe that I could build a life not defined by their control, a life where the things I loved were safe. Healing was not just about the hand. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself they had tried to grind down for years and realizing they could no longer reach me. Looking back now, I understand that the hammer was only the final blow in a long series of attempts to keep me small. Every time my father mocked my music or Jessica found a way to ruin something important, they were sending the same message that my dreams did not matter unless they served their vision of my life. For years, I let that message shape my choices. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. I made myself smaller so they would not feel threatened, and I convinced myself that one day they might see my value if I just tried hard enough. What I have learned is that silence only serves the ones who benefit from it. Abusers thrive in the shadows, and the longer you let them stay there, the more they believe they are untouchable. Speaking up is terrifying. It means risking backlash, gossip, and even losing people you thought you needed. But it also means opening a door to the possibility of real change. I know not everyone can stand in a crowded auditorium and show the world what has been done to them, but there is always a way to take back a piece of your power, whether it is by telling one trusted person's saving evidence or simply deciding you will not accept their version of reality as your own. That day at the recital, I was not just defending my right to play music. I was defending my right to decide who I am and who I will become. My father and sister tried to break me because they knew if I succeeded on my own terms, I would prove they never had the right to control me in the first place. That is the truth I carry forward, and the truth I hope others hear in my story. You do not have to wait for someone to give you permission to live freely. You can start by saying no more and meaning it. The first time I returned to a stage after the recital was 3 months later at a charity benefit for survivors of domestic violence held in the same county arts center where everything had changed. My hand was still stiff in the mornings, and some notes required extra focus, but I played a short piece I had written during recovery, a gentle yet determined melody that carried every ounce of resolve I had left. The lights were warm on my face, the keys cool under my fingertips, and when I looked out into the audience, I saw people leaning forward, listening not just to the music, but to the proof that I was still here, still moving forward. Maya sat in the front row recording, and Mr. Lawson stood at the side of the stage smiling like he had known this moment would come. Afterward, several people approached me quietly, sharing their own stories of control and cruelty and thanking me for making mine public. I realized then that telling the truth had created ripples I could not have predicted, ripples that might grow into waves for others. My father remained in custody awaiting trial, and Jessica had withdrawn from the university under the weight of her suspension and the public scrutiny. They were no longer daily presences in my life, but their absence was not what defined me now. What defined me was the fact that I had stood up in the moment it mattered most and refused to let them write the ending. I left the arts center that night with my music bag over my shoulder and the sense that the rest of my life was mine to shape. If you are hearing this and you have ever felt trapped by someone who claims to love you while holding you down, know this. Your voice matters, your story matters, and the moment you decide to speak is the moment they start to lose their hold. Share your truth, even if it shakes. Share it because somewhere someone needs to hear it. And if my story has reached you tonight, then stay with me for the next one because there are countless battles like mine, and together we can keep pulling them into the light.